Hello, listeners, and welcome to A Dash of Salt with AJ. I'm your host, Ahsoka Jackson, author, podcaster, poet, and proofreader. We left off last episode by mentioning Falco's attempts to express his feelings to Gabi. And of course, Gabi she really is a young Eren, like people have been saying. Even that confused sound she made was him, I swear. Now this brings me back to something I couldn't say earlier in my reaction to episode 3 for the sake of making sure not to spoil anything. The moment where Eren and Falco were first talking on the bench, and Eren asked whether the other recruit kicking Falco's butt was a girl. And hey, Eren definitely has some experience with that whole dynamic, including the protection aspect. But that scene, it was funny either way, just in isolation, but the fact that I already knew at the time that the soldier was actually Eren made it that much funnier and more precious and entertaining for me. Because Lord knows this boy has been notoriously dense sometimes when it comes to romance. And not just when it involves him. There's that whole deal with Marlo and Hitch, where both Marlo and Eren were busy criticizing her and thinking she should have been more concerned about the job and the people, basically. And their fellow recruits were utterly exasperated at them for not getting that Hitch said those words because she liked Marlo and didn't want his behind to end up dead. And one really hilarious thing is how Mikasa is staring at Eren in that scene, like she's having a moment of realization about just how clueless this child is. Yep, that's what you're dealing with, Mikasa. And this is a bit of a random aside, but I remember some conversation I saw about how people express affection. And the takeaway I got, and I think this was chiefly talking about platonic stuff, especially parent-child relationships. Now, of course, stuff varies due to any number of factors. But as a general thing, it sounds like rather than just commenting, I love you, Japanese parents would be more inclined to express their care and affection by doing things like helping their children, like with schoolwork, by encouraging them, and by telling them to be careful. That last part, expressing concern for their well-being, that's the way you express your fondness and concern for someone. Their safety and well-being matter to you, right? And while anime is not the best or most accurate guide culturally, of course, one consistent theme I have noticed is how one of the most powerful things you can do is either say that you'll protect someone or simply express concern for their safety, telling them don't die, don't get yourself killed, don't get hurt. It may not sound the most mushy, but it really is meaningful. And there's a woman I follow who teaches Japanese as a native speaker herself. And one thing she was explaining about differences between real-life culture and anime and stuff you might pick up from it is that certain things people say, like very strong, blatant confessions of love, that's like a very uncommon, circumstance-specific sort of thing. And you could really weird people out if you did that casually, especially with the platonic relationship. Basically, outright saying, oh, I love you, is even more, I guess, awkward in Japanese culture as a general thing than it is in some other ones. And it can already be awkward in those other cultures as well. But after she said that, I started paying attention and I realized that this actually is one area where I see real-life culture bleeding into the entertainment, because I do more often see characters express their affection by talking about someone's safety or well-being rather than other ways. And the funny thing for me is that I already see folks use the words so much, but then have their actions indicate otherwise, so the words themselves don't hold as much meaning for me anyways as they probably would for some other folks. Not that it isn't nice to hear sometimes, but it's definitely interesting to hear other perspectives on that, and to hear how different people both individually and as groups tend to handle things like that. And like I said, it varies. Even within more stoic cultures overall, some people are going to be more openly touchy-feely or verbally demonstrative. I hope you don't mind this whole digression here, but as I said when going to the topic of the recruits' athleticism and what kind of diet they might have had and everything, this exploration and consideration of the little details is something I want to do in this channel, and it's something I want to invite my viewers and listeners to partake in. And for me, this topic of how affection is expressed is likewise a part of trying to dive deeply into the material, because cultural backgrounds, linguistic background, those do have an impact on how stories are told and how things are ultimately expressed. Another example of that in a different way would be the scene where Eren first wakes up in jail after being immersed in his visions or memories after Armin inherits the Colossal Titan. Instead of just asking where he is, he asks who he is. And one thing not really explained in the subtitles is that Armin catches on to the fact that something is wrong, not merely because of the question, but also because of how it was asked. The personal pronoun Eren used to refer to himself in that sentence was a different one that he usually used. If I'm remembering correctly, Eren normally uses ore, while both Grisha and Armin tend to use boku, which I think is considered slightly more refined, though still a bit more on the casual side versus some other options. The rougher option definitely suits Eren. In any case, it wasn't until a fan explained that bit in a note that I understood what Armin was actually referring to there, and I really wish they could have fit that into the subtitles on the show somehow for clarity. But it's an example of how subtle things from the country and culture of origin can come into play and influence how the story is told and how the characters behave and express themselves. So while Hitch sort of shows a harsh way of expressing her feelings, the other characters read between the lines and knew that the important part was that she was worried for Marlowe's safety and upset that he was putting himself in harm's way. But neither he nor Eren picked up on that at the time. And I definitely see that commonality with both Gabi and young Eren, where they're extremely driven, and they take as an affront anything that interferes with their attempts to achieve whatever goal they have. Just like how Eren has been so frustrated with both Carla and Mikasa at different points because of their protectiveness and how they try to dissuade him from pursuing a career in the Survey Corps because of this. I already explained at length before how Eren cares a lot about other folks' safety, but really not enough when it comes to his own. But it is rather pleasing and amusing to see that now our man seems a lot sharper nowadays when it comes to stuff like this, as shown by his exchange with Falco. I'm proud of him, honestly. Now, if only Gabi could get there sometime this century. And I'm not saying she has to be interested in Falco or even approve of his protectiveness. That is not an obligation. She just needs to comprehend where he's coming from so she can view him accurately and make an informed decision on how to respond. We're running short on time, so I'm going to say in advance, thank you for joining me and I hope you had fun. Feel free to share or subscribe if you want. Be blessed and stay salty. Okay, so now we must address the cart titan in the room. I don't have a whole lot to say about that, but it definitely has to be highlighted. People kept bringing up the fact that this scene had apparently been cut, though I think I had seen a few voice what I mentioned before. The order of events is being tweaked here and there in the anime, so if you don't find a scene at its usual point, that doesn't automatically mean it's been cut entirely. Now I'm glad that they kept the scene, partly because it removes another source of fan complaints they were facing for this season. Like I've said before, I don't intend to act like they never mess up, but I also feel that they're dealing with an undue amount of criticism thus far, and that Wit Studio would have been criticized plenty as well, had it faced these levels of scrutiny that MAPPA is dealing with. And secondarily, I actually do really like the scene itself, having seen it. It's funny as heck, and even though they already show different aspects of how she still finds it easier to just move the way she did in cart titan form, this is the clearest example yet. And the timing makes it really startling too. I think we end up having much the same shocked reaction as Gadiart, and her own very blasé response to him is great. She's just flipping adorable, and she's also a highly capable member of the team. To be real, gear is not the only thing she ends up carrying, okay? That actually reminds me of Armin and comments folks have made about how crucial he is to his own team. Now, the one thing I do have to say is that it seems the main reason folks wanted to have that scene there was for the look at her tush. Well, we got that now, whether you were there for the humor, for her curves, or both. Look, I gotta be fair to the people here. As stated previously, I am far from immune to certain stuff. Hopefully I will behave myself and avoid saying anything that I will later look back upon and find myself withering with regret and embarrassment over. But when I see this same dynamic playing out with fans and Pieck, I have enough self-awareness that I'm just going to be chill about this and say that the one big thing I hope is that there won't be a bunch of creepy, obnoxious comments stemming from this. That's where I have to draw a line. If you're fond of the character, let's show her some respect and keep things reasonably classy, eh? It does make me glad that I brought up this sort of issue already in one of my trailer reaction videos. I had a little segment there towards the end of the episode where I went into that. By the way, you remember how Gadiart and Pieck were both there with the children, getting treated to meals by an increasingly poor Reiner? That's something they changed from the manga. In the manga, it was just the 4 children there. So I really liked that the anime added Pieck and Gadiart to the scene as well, and showed that lighter side of them. And just how the whole group has that bond and spends time together. Though they seriously should have chipped in some money too. That kind of thing can get expensive, as we saw.